The next sessions will be with Larry. Larry, where are you? Larry will take care about sharing the sessions. Larry, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Open the camera. Hi, Alan. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Larry, good to see you. Good to almost see you, Larry.
Yes.
Hello.
Larry. Hello, Larry.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here on audio.
What is your video?
Let me just. Find the right button here. Okay. I think
Perfect, Larry. Perfect.
Okay.
What you have at your back, Larry? Is this your rocket?
It's my telescope. That's where I see the future. So, well, it's good to be back. This is, I think I was with the first conference, and it's good to be back again. I think I have an exciting lineup, but I'm going to introduce everybody. But before we get started, just a little bit about me. I recently retired from 35 years at the University of Michigan, where I directed the Institute for Research on Labor, Employment, and the Economy. I directed an EDA University Center that Dan Ripke talked about a little bit. I'm the immediate past president of the Educational Association of University Centers. And listening to Tom O'Neill describe technology commercialization, I was engaged in that for most of my career, and actually did a study that was funded by the National Science Foundation and NIST on technology commercialization best practices. And if anybody's interested in anything I'm going to say here in the next 7 minutes or so, you can contact me through the program website and what have you. So, so to get started with the slide presentation, and am I sharing my screen with you, Dr. Hernadi?
Not yet, Larry.
Do you have my slide presentation?
I think so. Moment, Larry.
Because I'm sharing my screen on my screen, but maybe it's not coming up with you. And while we're getting there, I'm going to go ahead and just start narrating. The title of my presentation is the Digital Vector of Imagination, Creativity, Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Dissemination. I put imagination in there because I think imagination is where creativity starts. We imagine things. And when we imagine things, they are things that we are seeing in our brain, in our mind, but we're not actually in reality yet. So it's a matter of thought that has not yet become practice, if you will. And it's really central to human thinking, deductive reasoning. If you're deductive reasoning, you have to use your imagination. And a couple of examples of using your imagination are Jules Verne, who wrote a book From Earth to the Moon in 1865 and described a rocket ship and going to the moon and all sorts of science fiction fantastic things 100 years before it happened. He also wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was a voyage in a submarine under the sea in 1869, long before there were submarines. So those are things of the past where people use their imagination. More recently, an author, Kim Stanley Robinson, in 1992, 1993, and 1996 wrote the Mars trilogy: Red Mars, where Mars was colonized; Green Mars, where it was terraformed and people were living on the surface; and Blue Mars, when an atmosphere was created from the breaking down the water that was discovered in Mars. So that's another example of imaginative thinking. Today at the University of Michigan, there is a professor here who's the Dean of the College of Engineering, who is developing the plasma propulsion system for the Mars expedition, which will propel the capsule that goes to Mars and lands somewhere between the speed of rockets and the speed of light, because plasma is actually travels at the speed of light. So this is a pretty exciting innovation.
Larry,
yes.
Your presentation is ready. I share the screen.
Okay, if we go to slide number 4, that's about where I am.
Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the expedition to colonize Mars, and there is a video that I'm not going to show now, but if you do go back to the conference agenda and pick up the slide presentation, you can watch this video on propulsion, plasma propulsion. Next slide, please. So imagination starts with youth. You know, if you've had kids or you've been around kids, you know that they have a tremendous imagination. And as you grow older, authors, dreamers, scientists, entrepreneurs, we get into science, data science, and then science and knowledge. As we discover things and they become real, then there's issues as some of our speakers have talked about is implementation, replication, scalability. Next slide, please. When we're talking about innovation, there are 3 things that we have to be thinking about, and that is the technology readiness level. And NASA, the National Space Association Agency of the United States, has this 1 to 9. So technology readiness level, manufacturing readiness level, and investment readiness level. And Dan and a few other people talked about the importance of these things. Next slide, please. A few examples of innovation in where digital science is involved is iron air energy power generation, batteries that literally use iron and the rusting process, the oxidation process that can be advanced or reversed and produce power with ionization, a lot of things that I don't understand, but it has the potential to actually power the grid. Next slide, please. Digital twinning is another example of the digitization of our current world. Digital twinning is using a virtual replica, building a virtual replica of whether it is a system, a device, or a person. Next slide. Next slide, please. We heard a little bit about smart cities, but digital twinning is really driving a lot of the advancement in smart cities, where you're creating a digital replica of a city with all the inputs, transportation systems, labor, education, financial, digital infrastructure, and running scenarios, very complex scenarios, to determine outcomes and results that then can be actually implemented in the real world counterpart. Next slide. Also, medicine is now involved in developing very early stage digital twins of individuals. So imagine you have a digital twin that your medical professional uses the digital twin to create and conduct scenarios of different treatments, right down to the cellular, molecular, biological, chromosomal, genetic level, where you can do these experiments and determine what the best outcome is going to be, and then apply those treatments to the actual patient. This is very early stage, but again, go back to Jules Verne, who had a journey to the moon in 1865. So what we can imagine can eventually become a way of life, can become part of our everyday experience and opportunities. So I think imagination is a very, very important thing to consider as we go about our lives and as practitioners and scientists, to let our imagination drive some of the things that we strive to achieve. Next slide. So your homework assignment is to use your imagination, get ideas, get inspired, use your vision, conceive of things, visualize them, realize them, invent them, disseminate them. These are the steps that you take, beginning with imagination that drive creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, and all the things that we're going to be learning about and have learned about and in this conference. So that's my little introduction. I'm going to go ahead and introduce now our next speaker, who is Professor Alan Day at Washtenaw Community College. Community colleges are a very important part of the innovation ecosystem, because this is where young people come to be able to learn some of the basic things. Many of them go on to advanced degrees, but it's a very important part of the academic infrastructure, and Washtenaw Community College is known as one of the top community colleges in the country for many different technologies, and I'm going to let him take it from here.
Thank you, Larry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So as Larry pointed out, I'm Alan Day, and I'm a faculty member. I taught at Washtenaw Community College for 24 years. I also served as department chair for our Transportation Technologies Department for 8 years. Interestingly enough, I'm also a graduate of Washtenaw Community College in the department that I teach in. So I kind of have a unique view that at one point I was one of the students that was in the program. I have a presentation here I'll try to get up on the screen quickly. Can somebody verify that you can see that?
You can see it.
Awesome. All right, we're doing good if we got the technology working today too. So really kind of what I wanted to talk about is how our programs have evolved and how the college has evolved to better serve the students of Washtenaw County and the state of Michigan, and really now with online programs, what could be the whole world as far as ongoing education, and really some of the innovations that we've done at a curriculum and an education and an institution level in order to meet the needs of the industry. And I think to do that, I'll move to my next slide here, but I don't want to spend much time on this, but I did kind of want to point out that, you know, we started before I was born, a long time ago, in the late 1960s as a community college. And community colleges in Michigan are sort of an initiative that are developed by the local communities and then put together as a college program, and then they sort of grow from there. And, you know, I don't think that anybody back then would have dreamed that the college would have become what it is now. We've had peaks of students, over 20,000 students a year registered for courses at Washtenaw Community College, and there's a lot of students here. Shortly after the college was established and started to run, We started transportation classes. Back then we called them like mechanics classes. And then eventually that got consolidated and moved to our main campus together with the rest of the college. And that's actually proved to be really important because of how we share resources and our technology and our programs now. And we've actually sort of developed a funding model now for our occupational education and hands-on programs where we use grant money for our technology updates. And we've been lucky enough to be able to get a group of grants that have really helped us move our program forward and match the needs of the industry. And that's also been important for us as we've had more students that come through the program that go to different sectors of the transportation industry. I'll show in a little bit, but our tuition is extremely low. Probably by any standards worldwide, it's low. And so we can't really use tuition dollars to build buildings or, make infrastructure changes or big technology changes. But we do have a system in place in order for that to work. And so we actually have launched new programs on campus for test technicians. And this is different than your traditional technician that would fix cars or just repair things. And as that program launched, we really were trying to analyze changes in the industry that aligned with how our technicians were getting hired. We noticed a change because we used to have a lot of technicians who would come to our college. And our courses, because we're a community college and in a 2-year institution, we're really focused directly on trying to give the students skills they could use for a job. And so a lot of students, when they sign up, they're picking the specific courses first that they want to have the skills they're going to use in the workplace. That's probably different than a lot of other college models because we do have students who they're not looking at whether they need to take an English or a math or some other science class. They're looking at the specific courses they need in order to get the skills in the workplace. And while I think we do need STEM education to make sure that we have students that have those skills, many of the students that are coming here are analyzing how can what the college gives me today work tomorrow for me in a job. And we have some further enhancements that I'll talk about in a few slides that we've added to the college and how we're working on a model at the college to work with employers. So I didn't put this here because I want to go over every certificate program. I'm not trying to sell signing up for classes at the community college to the people here at the conference, but more specifically, I just wanted to explain that our model, many students who come into the program, they sign up for a certificate, and these certificate programs generally do not include any general education courses. So they don't have a math course or an English course as an example in them. The students sign up for classes that are part of the core education while they're here. And our regional employers also align with that model. So they know that a student that has a certificate program and a certificate that completed the program has had these specific courses that specifically align to their skill set that they're going to use. And we have advanced certificates too, which are really just an expansion with more skill sets. In some cases, we put higher technology courses into these advanced certificates because we need the students to be able to achieve a higher level in a ladder type learning environment. And in other cases, we make the students more broad-based so they can be a better asset to their employers or have a better chance in their careers long-term as they leave the college and go and work in the workplace. And then finally, we have associate's degrees. For us, that's 2-year degrees in most cases, where the students will include the gen ed requirements in order to achieve a full college degree. And so that would be a college degree that would be recognized by any accredited college in the United States. But also, this would give the students the ability to transfer their 2-year degree. There are cases where they can have a 3+1, where they take some additional credits that the college will offer so that they can go to a participating university where they can work on a 4-year degree as well. And that kind of gets me to the next point. I'll briefly just show you some quick numbers. I just pulled this off our webpage currently to make sure I had the right information, because anytime we talk about numbers, I want to make sure that I get it right. The thing that strikes me about this, though, is our in-district basic rate. So this is a person that lives in our county, where our county helps support our college. They're only paying $95 a credit hour. And there's a $15 infrastructure fee. I'm sure there's some other fees involved here, but they're all minor. What strikes me the most about that is that I can remember taking classes here approximately 1990. These aren't official numbers, but what I remember, and it was $55 a credit hour. So we've actually had a very small increase in tuition over all of those years. You can probably tell from my gray beard that I've been around for quite a while. This isn't I'm not talking about tuition from a year ago. And so the grants that we use to fund this, we've gotten Department of Transportation and Michigan grants in order to update our programs. And we really take this seriously because
إذا
we
كانت
feel
المادة الدراسية التي يأخذها الطالب في نفس الدولة تختلف عن المادة الدولية.
Whoever's speaking, please mute.
we take this really seriously, partly because we don't want to squander these resources, but also because we want to be able to use our resources for the best benefit to our students. And directly, when our students go and work for employers, we want to make sure that it's the best benefit for them. And our employer partnerships are really critical because we need our employers to have faith and trust that when we put students through our programs, that they're going to be trained in the things that they need in order to work in the workplace and the things that we say are part of our curriculum. And so really, I want to focus on a specific case here that really talks about some innovation and how we've sort of changed the model a little bit of how the college works. So in our cybersecurity programs are kind of an example of that. We identified that there were a lot of unfilled positions, and we knew that this was an emerging market. It's always a little bit difficult for us to balance how we spend money on an emerging market. Some things are a flash in the pan, or they don't require entire new programs. Just as a specific example of that, like hybrid electric vehicles is an example. We knew we needed education years ago on electric vehicle safety as an example, because vehicles were coming with high voltage batteries. Some colleges followed a model where they developed entire hybrid vehicle programs. But interestingly enough, other than the electric motor and some electronics and the battery, hybrid electric vehicles are the same as the vehicles that have been on the road years before. They have new technology updates that, of course, we wanted to include in our programs. We made the decision pretty quickly to add individual pieces to our existing curriculum and rearrange things rather than develop a whole new program. But in this case, we needed entire programs.
التكنولوجيا الجديدة التي تساهم بتوفير الاستشار لهؤلاء الطلاب.
Who's speaking? Please mute because we can hear you on our presentation here. Go ahead and plow right through it, Alan.
No problem. And so it's interesting because we have to make that decision, and those can be almost critical decisions for a college. You know, we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars a year to spend on program development. Find out that they're not important. So the host of the meeting can mute other participants.
لذلك
And so kind of how our higher learning structure has worked is we have those certificates, advanced certificates and associate degrees we've talked about, plus our articulations with universities. We've also worked hard to develop some apprenticeships here on campus, but one model that has evolved out of our technicians that we're primarily focused on just repairing vehicles or repairing equipment. They have moved into many technical positions at the transportation employers that are important to our region. And so we've kind of had an interesting thing happen while we try to align our resources with jobs that are in the area and the technological advancements of those jobs. We've also changed the way the employers use those technicians and the people that come in for careers. And there's really two pieces to that I think are really important. One, knowing that our graduates and the students who become employees in the market have a high level of skills from the program that they've gone through. They give those employees much more responsibility. In turn, of course, that means they can get paid more, but they also hold a lot more responsibility for the things that happen at the company in order to make the company successful. And so recognizing that those employees are now critical to their operations, they're starting to look at them as a lifelong career employee. Sort of almost like the old model we used to have many years ago, where you'd try to get a job at a company and you'd stay there for a very long time. In that a lot of the employers now expect that if they hire a technician with a 2-year degree or someone who's already started an undergraduate program, that they're going to help them pay for their college. They're going to help them arrange a schedule so in the evening they can attend classes to continue their education. And they know when that student reaches the next level of attainment of their career, they can move that employee into a higher level position at their company. And they want to have that model because they realize once the students achieve and their employees achieve that level of attainment, they'll be likely to move someplace else and take the talent with them if they don't have those mechanisms in place. So our employer partnerships have grown from simply, do you have someone that can fill a job, to do we have people who can fill jobs that are highly technical, to do you have people who can fill jobs that are highly technical that can grow with the company. These ongoing paid continuing education systems that are in place very often don't include the community college in our 2-year systems. Occasionally, students will come back and go in a different direction or use new technology that are now part of our programs that weren't when they originally went through. But most of the time, we're talking about 2-year associate degree students who are now seeking undergraduate 4-year degrees and then ultimately master's degree programs. And initially, when we saw this pattern, we thought, well, it's a few students, they landed at a community college because for some reason they didn't start already at a 4-year institution. But now we have large groups of students that follow this plan. We can't count on a few hands anymore. It's dozens and dozens and many, many students that are in our programs. Our current student count here in our transportation department is a couple hundred students a semester. So we have a lot of students that are working their way through their 2-year programs here. And so we've really, go ahead.
Alan, yeah, if you could begin to wrap up here in the next minute or two.
Gotcha, no problem. So let me see where we're at here. Really, these innovations that we've made, we're trying to now align ourselves with employers to help them with employees. So our students are going into a career where the employers are going to be able to help them move forward, and the students immediately get something out of this so they can get a gainful job as they complete their degree program. So we don't just become another mechanism of the students having to follow through a long academic plan before they can be employed. And I only had one more slide anyway. I was going to show you pretty cybersecurity stuff, so I can call it there to keep us on schedule. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alan. And I guess the reason that I brought Alan on is because this is a practitioner session, and where the practitioners come from are places like Alan's classrooms that then come into industry. And Alan and I had a conversation, and many of them go on for advanced degrees at the University of Michigan or other institutions, master's degrees, BA, and then master's and even PhDs. So it's a very important door into advanced technology and practice and what have you. So thank you, Alan, for the presentation and the work that you do. And I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Elsie Harper Anderson, a colleague of mine. I'd say an old colleague, but she's young compared to me. Good to see you again, Elsie. And I know that Dr. Hanadi knows you. We talked about you as we were putting the session together, and want to welcome you. And I'm not going to talk about what you're going to talk about because you can do that much better than I can. And I know it's going to be interesting. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry. It's good to see you again. It's been many years. I'm not able to share my screen while someone else is sharing. So if the person, great, thank you. Start my timer. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and this presentation is probably going to be different from the others. As Larry mentioned, my name is Elsie Harper Anderson. I'm an associate professor at Virginia Commonwealth University and the Wilder School of Government. And I do research. My research mainly focuses on entrepreneurial ecosystems. And right now I'm focusing on entrepreneurial support organizations and their impact on equity. So today I'm going to discuss 3 trends that I see that are impacting racial equity within entrepreneurial ecosystems using a combination of research projects that I've done over the last several years. So just by way of background, we know that entrepreneurship I'm in urban planning as a field. Entrepreneurship is considered to be a tool for poverty alleviation and also leveling the playing field between various groups in society. Also, over the last several years, when we think about ecosystems, there's been an explosion in the number and variety of types of organizations that are involved in assisting entrepreneurs. And that has that has, over this last several years, there's also been an increase in focus, particularly on high growth and technology-based firms through the entrepreneurial support organizations. Alongside these trends, we've seen that inequality in entrepreneurship, particularly racial inequality and gender inequality, has been ongoing and well documented. However, in the last couple of years, a greater amount of attention has been focused on inequality within entrepreneurial ecosystems due to the racial reckoning that happened in the US due to the killing of George Floyd and across the world, really. But there's been an increased focus on racial equity and entrepreneurship in a lot of other areas of society. So one of the trends that we're seeing is that technology-focused entrepreneurial support organizations are being more exclusive in terms of who they provide their services to. So I want to just talk about a study that I did a couple of years ago where I did 150 in-depth structured interviews with administrators of entrepreneurial support organizations. And I also did a survey of the same entrepreneurial support organizations. I won't go too much into the details of the methods, but what I found is that technology-focused entrepreneurial support organizations tend to assist fewer businesses than non-technology focused. Also, technology-focused entrepreneurial support organizations are less likely to reach out to and include underrepresented entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups, and also that technology-focused entrepreneur support organizations tend to be more likely to be funded privately than publicly. So just to look a little more into that, one of the questions that I asked in my interviews, and I did all 150 interviews myself, so I know the data very well. And these are just a sampling of some of the things that came out. I asked the interviewees to define entrepreneurial ecosystems, and technology-focused entrepreneurial support organizations, or the administrators, were more likely to give definitions that were exclusionary or that excluded others. For example, they only included high growth companies as opposed to, this is a quote, as opposed to professional services entities and street level businesses. So only including certain businesses within their definition of an ecosystem, which has implications for who gets funding and services. Also, those organizations were more likely to exclude, not offer their services to certain entrepreneurs. And then finally, they generally felt like serving those entrepreneurs was somebody else's responsibility. The other thing I did with the survey data is I created an accessibility index, an inclusion index, and an equity index. The accessibility was based on geographic accessibility, which is rooted in the literature on serving certain populations. I also included consideration of what the requirements were for receiving service from certain entrepreneur support organizations. My next index was on inclusion, included outreach to vulnerable groups, and you can see the other components there. And the two combined made up the equity index. And what I found was that ESOs that target technology firms exclusively are less accessible in general. You can see the mean accessibility scores here. Those that do not target had accessibility score
الوصول الجغرافي
of 13.19, and those that targeted had a lower score of 10.6. Also, ESOs with high equity levels were less likely to target technology firms. So you see here that those with high equity levels at the bottom were mostly those that didn't target target technology firms, and those with low equity levels were those that targeted technology firms. The second trend I wanted to talk about is the shift to online service delivery models and how that's impacting equity within entrepreneurial ecosystem. A second study that I did during the pandemic is that I interviewed leaders of entrepreneurial support organizations in 4 cities. And since I'm running short of time, I won't go through all of the details of the methodology. And we know that the digital divide, there's a digital divide, and that minorities are more likely to not have access to broadband, not have access to computers. I'm going to skip this slide on COVID. But what I found is that the ESOs were facing many challenges. One of them was the inability to deliver face-to-face services and online access issues, as well as loss of revenue and some others. The main solutions that they had was to shift to online and invest in digital-based services. And what this led to is a further alienation of those entrepreneurs that were on the wrong side of the digital divide. So that shift to online services made those services even more inaccessible. Even more importantly, I asked them which of these changes that you've made during the pandemic will you carry going forward? And many of them said they would offer more of their services virtual and in hybrid programming, which means that that digital divide will play an even larger role in which entrepreneurs are able to access the resources that are provided by these support organizations. The third trend that I just want to touch on quickly is that another trend that I've noticed in surveying entrepreneurial support organizations is that many of them, or more of them, are receiving a larger share of their funding from private entities. And in the earlier study where I talked about the equity scores, it shows that the more funding that comes from private sources, the lower the equity score for the entrepreneurial support organizations. So just in conclusion, these trends are concerning because our entrepreneurial ecosystems are a part of the larger economic development strategies for local areas, which are supposed to support all of the residents and entrepreneurs. ESOs have to consider the implications of their actions if they want to contribute to strong, equitable, and inclusive ecosystems. In order to support underrepresented entrepreneurs, local officials should invest in the creation of educational resources and partnering initiatives to ensure that the trends we're currently seeing do not further exacerbate entrepreneurial inequality. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Elsie. I think that there are implications and maybe lessons to be learned. And you mentioned globally earlier in your discussion, but with migration, which is a worldwide thing. Europe is facing a lot of the same things that we are here in the U.S. of people coming in. You have different races, different religions, ethnic groups, gender. And inequality in underserved populations and underrepresented populations aren't just confined to the United States or any one country. It's a global issue, and the digital divide is something that's certainly apparent here, but it's certainly prevalent much more in underdeveloped countries. So I think that the work that you're doing and the areas of inquiry that you're exploring are important here, but they also have global implications. So thank you for presentation and thank you for the work you do. And thanks for participating.
Thank you, Larry.
Is Dr. Janimir, is he on the screen yet?
Yes,
don't.
I'm here.
Oh, very good. And we can see you and hear you. So I just want to, I haven't met Dr. Janimir personally, but I know his colleague, Mike Molnar, and my name is Larry Molnar. So Mike and I joke that we're 10th cousins, 5 times removed from Hungary. But anybody who is a colleague of Mike Molnar, I have a great deal of respect for. And Dr. Janimir is the executive secretary of the Subcommittee on Advanced Manufacturing and in the National Science and Technology Council, of which I am very familiar because that's closely associated with the White House. And he's also associated with the Innovation Institute of Manufacturing USA, which is headquartered, I guess, in NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And I'm going to turn the podium over to you, Doctor, and let you tell us more about your area of expertise.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. Let me try to share my screen. I assume everything looks okay from your end?
Good. Looks good.
Thanks. Well, it's nice to meet you, Larry. And my apologies apologies from Dr. Mike Molnar, who was invited and could not attend due to other conflicts. In addition of thanking you, Larry, I want to thank Dr. Al Mubaraki for outstanding organization of this conference. It seems to me that everything's going so well and so organized, and everything is great. It's really a pleasure to be here and participating in this great conference. I'm going to talk about the adoption of artificial intelligence in manufacturing. And of course, we all know that manufacturing is critical to the economic and national security and impacts jobs, economy, energy, material consumptions, climate change, and many, many other issues. And artificial intelligence is becoming very important to manufacturing these days. So I may go to the next slide. I'm using multiple screens and I'm having trouble going back and forth between them. All right, we all know that application of AI and machine learning, or ML, to manufacturing has so many benefits in truly transforming manufacturing. For example, enhancing decision-making, improving productivity, improving quality control, enhancing the supply chain, and many other benefits. So what I'm going to describe is a symposium that we had actually over the past 2 years. Before I go to the details, let me just provide some background. There are many R&D activities on the way around the world, and even in the US, in industry, in academia, and also in government organizations. But a coordinated effort is lacking. And we really need a coordinated effort between all the participants to be able to fully adopt AI in manufacturing systems. Our subcommittee on advanced manufacturing, which is located at the White House, established a symposium to develop specific recommendations for the adoption of AI in advanced manufacturing. And the symposium consisted of 3 separate workshops to identify the issues and challenges and develop strategies for scaling AI adoption. Workshop 1 emphasized the need for industry-wide strategies and identified how factory and supply chain applications enhanced with data and capability sharing need to be considered together. The workshop also described how these 4 areas can be scaled together with network effects and industry interconnectedness. Essentially, everyone has to connect together and work together, driving towards success. Workshop 2 defined 3 goals to overcome the greatest barriers to AI adoption based on monetization opportunities. For anything to happen, there has to be a monetization reason. It has to be some benefits. For example, improved productivity, and so on and so forth. Workshop 3 produced an actionable roadmap and recommendations for specific R&D strategies, government programs, and industry actions that can initiate and accelerate AI adoption. We were really very fortunate that we, let me see where I am. Okay, we were really very fortunate that we could bring together about 100 subject matter experts who represented both the manufacturing community and the AI ML community from industry, academia, and government, who participated in the 3 workshops to develop the recommendations and the roadmap that I will briefly touch upon. So, if we look at a summary of some of the discussions of the workshop, manufacturing is unique from other industries. The workshop participants identified 4 specific characteristics for AI adoption, and these are shown in the 4 boxes on the perimeter of this chart. These included AI for industry-wide data sharing, AI for factory floor, AI for discovery of capabilities and solutions, and AI for building resilient supply chains. As we look at these characteristics, 4 common themes or opportunities arise, and these are shown in the middle of this chart. Meaningful shared data from the manufacturing environment, easy to use AI tools and applications for manufacturing, interconnectedness between manufacturing entities that preserve privacy and trust, and enabling network effects to grow the manufacturing ecosystem. So, as we go forward in our discussion with respect to what can be done and how are we going to be able to do this quickly, a roadmap emerged from the discussions. Starting from the upper left corner of this chart and moving to the right and to the lower corner, it shows how over time the goals for AI adoption in manufacturing can be achieved by the details shown in these boxes. Now, the workshop discussed 3 broad goals, and these are on the left side of this chart. Enable digital capabilities at small and medium-sized manufacturers, recognizing that 98% of manufacturing companies in the US, and I assume in many other countries, comprise of small, medium-sized manufacturers that employ less than 500 employees, and they need help to enter the digitalization arena that we're all talking about. We need to incentivize AI adoption throughout established supply chains, the current supply chains we already have. And we need to enable new business models so that AI adoption can occur. Each goal consists of 3 sets of actions, and these are shown in the green boxes, that systematically develop the path forward to successfully adopt and scale AI in manufacturing. due to limited time, instead of describing each item on this slide, I will go directly to the main recommendations. And essentially, if we look at the broad recommendations that emerged from this workshop, we recognize that value of AI depends on company and intercompany strategies. The symposium addressed factory and intercompany solutions in conjunction with industry strategies for scaling access to data and expertise that are largely available only through collaboration. R&D about industry scaling and deployment are needed to push these capabilities to manufacturing, with pre-production prototypes and first production runs. Technology R&D from concept through pre-production is insufficient by itself. So symposium recommendations center on a roadmap organized to overcome a current lack of industry tools, trust, confidence, and experience with scaling and deployment, which together make starting up an adoption cycle for interconnected AI implementation a difficult problem without R&D. Close collaboration between industry, academia, and government is needed to move forward with the adoption of AI in manufacturing. First and foremost, it was recommended to establish new and/or expand existing public-private partnerships to facilitate a broad range of R&D for adoption of AI in advanced manufacturing. And finally, the role of small and medium-sized manufacturers in the manufacturing supply chain and the importance of workforce development are also recognized in these recommendations. So finally, I want to thank you for your attention. And it is very important for economic development, not only in the US, but also in all countries, to take advantage of AI in manufacturing. AI technologies promise to be the most powerful tool in generations to expand knowledge, increase prosperity, and enrich the human experience. And these technologies will be the foundation of the innovation economy that we have been talking about, and a source of enormous power for countries that harness them. Many of the most important real-world impacts will come from figuring out how to employ existing AI algorithms and systems, and then develop new tools and new algorithms to try to expand and reach our goal of full AI adoption in manufacturing. So with that, I like to thank again the organizing team, Dr. Molnar and Dr. Al-Mubaraki, for inviting me to this great conference. And the full report can be downloaded from the address that I've shown on my on this last slide. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me by email later. And so thanks you again, and I'll go back to you, Larry.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jahanmer. I found your presentation to be very interesting. In my time at the University of Michigan, my first job was with the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, working with small and medium-sized manufacturers in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. And then I had a lot of involvement with the MEP programs and with the innovation institutes, which seem to be fairly institutionalized now, thankfully, in Congress and with funding and what have you. And with the guidance of people like you and my friend Mike Molnar, I think there's an awful lot of really good work that's being done. And to get this in front of an international audience as we are now, I think it's important for the world itself and other countries that can learn from some of the infrastructure and institutionalization of programs that we've done here in the United States over the years. So thank you for your work and thank you for your presentation. So we're going to move on to our last speaker, who is Tom Perorazio, who's also a colleague of mine. I've been working with Tom for the past 10 or maybe longer years at the University of Michigan, and since he's left the university and is now back at a very important position as the project administrator for the protection of international research, I thought that he would be a good speaker to talk about some of the challenges that the University of Michigan, as the largest public research institution in the United States, and with all other institutions, both in this country and across the world, that are doing research that is somewhat sensitive. There's intellectual property involved and a lot of actual threats, especially when we're in the digital age to technology and advances. So he's going to talk a little bit about this new program at the University of Michigan, and hopefully we can learn from it. It's all yours, Tom.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Larry. Hope everybody can hear me and you can see the screen I just shared. Should be a big blue,
Yep.
big blue splash screen here. Okay. So as Larry mentioned, so I recently started a new position. It's a new position for me, but it's also a new position at the university to look at the threats to international research that come from collaboration and how we can protect our investigators, the research projects we have, and all that. So I want to just kind of give you a high-level overview of what the environment is for that. I thought that might be the best thing to cover some things that were be more generally applicable rather than talk about things that have to do with our particular university struggles. I will go into some of that. So okay, so in this field, we talk a lot about research integrity and protecting research. Research security is the common term. It's really key to international engagement, and which we mean by having our faculty work with collaborators from overseas all over the world. So it's a really important element of the research program to have international engagement. Would be a robust part of our portfolio. U.S. universities remain committed to undertaking international engagement in research in accordance with the values that we would consider consistent with academic freedom. So the example of the National Academies put out a statement or report in 2017, listed the values here, which I think we could all agree with. They're important for the conduct of science between institutions and just having the best results that we can get. The concern that we have is that there are certainly actors that have malign interests that seek to cut through or to break down some of those values and some of those norms and practices of institutional integrity, and not keep with those values that we consider consistent with academic freedom. And that really creates a lot of concern because it can endanger the U.S. taxpayer investment in research, can be a threat to our economic competitiveness, can give technology advantages away to other countries. It can erode the public trust and subsequent to public investment in science, and then just all these would be a threat to our national security if technology and a lot of data and such would get out. So in the last several years, there's been a renewed interest, we could say, in congressional oversight, really having members of Congress and the White House also involved, really trying to make sure that universities know what's going on with respect to their international engagement, and then they can report on things to do with that activity. And so all the federal agencies that provide funding, such as National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, et cetera, all these departments have been coming up with guidance and issuing directives to the institutions. So they're having the institutions be the enforcement mechanism for these concerns about international engagement and research security. Those agencies themselves are also trying to harmonize their guidance, because a lot of them traditionally have had, I wouldn't say conflicting, but not all require the exact same things. And so what you might turn in for NSF will be different than what you would turn in for NIH, and et cetera. So there's a movement to get the agencies themselves to have similar or more standardized guidance for institutions. So I would call that in progress. So in general, the government, of course, institutions we're concerned about what we would say is undue foreign influence over research. And so this is being taken very seriously by the U.S. Department of Justice, the offices of Inspector Generals of the various agencies and parts of the government, really moving to ensure that U.S. Universities and down the individual faculty level and department level are complying with legal statutes, with laws, regulations, agency directives, et cetera. So that's resulted in increased scrutiny over the sponsors and agencies, or from the sponsors and agencies themselves onto the institutions, as I said, on sources of research support, institutional affiliations, international collaborations between universities and between individual faculty members. So there's a law enforcement angle here. There has been a small number of recent high-profile cases that have resulted in punishments for individual faculty or a settlement on behalf of universities. And then there's other ongoing investigations into research practices. As I said, there's a small number of cases that have been successfully prosecuted. Other cases have been dismissed. There were investigations, but other cases have been dismissed after finding that there was no improper actions. And so, but there is this increased scrutiny that U.S. institutions are having to work with. So if I could just summarize the concerns in a couple areas. I mean, generally, we're talking about concerns about espionage and competitiveness. So there are ongoing threats to the, as I said before, the U.S. competitiveness and national security. This involves the loss or deliberate theft, again, by malign foreign actors, of scientific and intellectual assets, the unpublished research findings, data sets, other technology that's still not yet been published or not yet been classified. In general, this creates this kind of unfair playing field for institutions because now we have institutions overseas that would be, in essence, maybe competing for funding of their own in these research areas that are kind of building their research on the back of U.S. taxpayer-funded research. And so without having to undertake the cost and risk of their own research programs, they are exploiting our institutions. So that's the first area. The second one is a loss of scientific and engineering talent. So there's a lot of talent recruitment programs that are targeting high-profile members of the faculty at prominent institutions, and they seek to provide these faculty with kind of a sweetheart deal, so to speak, where they would give them incentives, as either a stipend or other financial incentives to come work there. And these come with a lot of kind of binding and very restrictive contracts, which would have things like non-disclosure requirements and other ways to keep the faculty members' hands tied about what they're able to disclose. And all this is to gain the access to that person's, their knowledge, maybe even set up a parallel lab or a new research lab over in the other country, have access to their data, just their information, their intellectual property. So it's not that you can't be in a foreign talent program, but those have to be disclosed and managed. We can talk about that. So other concerns just involve just inappropriate use of U.S. taxpayer dollars in general. So conflicts of interest and commitment policies are becoming under renewed scrutiny. We're looking to see if, again, about disclosures of any faculty members' appointments or affiliations, collaborations with foreign institutions, foreign organizations. We're also looking to see, is there any overlap in funding between the research that's funded by U.S. taxpayers and what might be funded by some other overseas organization, to make sure that faculty members are not double dipping, so to speak, and to have the same research project funded by two different entities. So this will come down to disclosure. And so the problem is that if researchers do get this foreign support, financial support, but not disclosing it, then the institution can't make decisions as transparently as they could otherwise. The last area would be confidentiality of the peer review process. So again, to the extent that there are malign foreign influences, we do have people that have been coming to trying to get data, get IP, and bring those things back to their home institution, their home governments, and never give attribution. This is an area that's been targeted by the FBI. They have what they would call non-traditional collectors, the people that are kind of sent here for the express purposes of maybe appearing to be a student or appearing to be a visiting scholar, but have these ties to military or governments that they don't reveal to us. And so those people can be in a position to gain access to things that they should not or would not otherwise. So all of this creates this administrative burden on institutions to police all this. One important area we want to mention is non-discrimination. So in enforcing all these rules and trying to keep up with these policies, the institutions cannot be seen as targeting individual investigators or students or any groups because of their nationality, ethnicity, anything like that. And so you have to do these in sort of non-discriminatory ways and find other ways to be cued into maybe where the risk is. Universities must be mindful of intimidation or pressure discrimination by foreign students. Some of that can be from faculty here. So investigators may decide, I'm just going to play it safe. I'm not going to share any information with my students from overseas, other countries. But this violates U.S. immigration law and civil rights law, so they can't do that. There are export control policies about what are called deemed exports. So when you have somebody in your lab or your department or your program, your project, and they are given access to data or technology or anything like that, if that person, again, is from another country, that can be considered what's called a deemed export, in the sense that it's being taken out of the country potentially.
So Tom, if you could kind of wrap it up here in the next minute or so. Yeah,
I can do that. And so I just got a couple things to touch on. And then I'll just talk about cybersecurity and its importance as how we share and store data. So that's an area which unto itself could be an own data presentation, but the government's maintaining lists of companies that have ties with foreign governments that U.S. companies are not allowed to do business with. And so we want to know if anybody's supported in those regards. So the administrative burden comes down to, again, this focus on disclosure, education institutions to make more information available. There's some consequences listed there of adverse outcomes that could happen to the science project as a whole, as well as individual institutions, like 4, 5, and 7 would be consequences that would fall to individual institutions. So universities share this commitment to trying to international engagement and keep doing it with in a way consistent with our values. There's 6 areas listed here of ways universities can institute actions to have more disclosure, to have more education, to have more support for faculty about these practices, about the regulations, how to develop risk-based approaches to thinking about these kind of things, and just to be better partners with everybody that's doing the investigations. And upcoming actions, the universities will continue to work with federal agencies, the White House, and other groups. Again, this harmonization underway will take time. Universities are kind of developing their own data systems to see how can we mine the data that we already have about publications or funding or whatnot, and to figure out where the risk is. And then we have upcoming new technologies coming online that will help with the systematic disclosure and management of faculty information. ORCID IDs is something that faculty can manage. Science, EV is a way to upload your other support and your current and pending documents to a central place. So the community is looking at these kinds of things to help make it much more standardized, easier for faculty and universities to comply, and just make everybody the research more secure. So that is it.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. I'm really pleased to see that the University of Michigan and other universities are engaged in protecting this valuable asset that a lot of time and effort and funding goes into. Obviously, there are threats in the digital environment to all these things. And I'm glad to see this new position, and they have the right man for the job. I know that too. So thanks for your presentation. I think, Dr. Hanadi, we've kind of exceeded our time limit by a little bit. So I think forego the round table, and you can move on to the next session. I'd just like to say thank you to Dr. Hanadi for again pulling off a great conference. I think it's really important. It's grown globally. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people that tune into this thing across the world. So it's becoming a more and more important and forward-thinking event on an annual basis. So thank you for all that you're doing, Doctor.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Professor Larry, for chairing the sessions. And great thanks also for all the speakers and participants in our largest first conference focus in economic diversifications based on digital economy or based on the latest program, such as innovation program, entrepreneurial program, and also AI program and accelerator and incubators program.